Welcome into the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. My name is Jarrett Samuels. I'm the host of this podcast. And men, as always, thank you for checking out today's podcast episode. Now, when you get the opportunity, make sure you visit thepursuitofmanliness.com. You can find all things Pursuit of Manliness. You can check out what is new in the gear store. Specifically, I want to highlight our fall men's retreat, September 29th and 30th here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Men, this is a weekend you do not want to miss. Now, all podcasts within the Pursuit of Manliness, whether it is the Monday interview, Wednesday Quiet Life, or Friday Out in the Garage, are intended to help us pursue being spiritually sound, mentally strong, relationally established, and physically fit. Men, it's time for today's podcast conversation. Let's pray. God, thank you for today. Thank you for the gift of technology. I thank you for the men that will be listening to this conversation and the conversation that John and I are about to have about this book, but about just the way of living is something we desperately need. And God, I just believe that John's going to say some things about the book, but about his life and the way he raises his kids and the things that he does. That there's a man somewhere. He might be driving in his vehicle. He might be working out. He might be sitting in a deer stand. I don't know where he's at, but God, you know exactly where he's at. And you're going to get right to him at just the right time. And I pray that the seeds that are planted would take root 160, 30-fold. The men that are listening, God, that they would be men of presence, men of value, men who will stand in the gap between their family and the rest of the world and do the things, sometimes hard things, that need to be done. Because this world is desperate for men of God to be men of God. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, men, at this time, I want to introduce John Lovell to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. John, thanks for making time today, being on the show.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
Well, John, the last few days, actually a few weeks, I'm learning a lot more about you, a lot more about your ministry, and man, I am impressed. It is it's a desperate need, and I'm thankful that you do what you do and the way that you do it. For the guys who may be unfamiliar with who you are and what you're about, would you just take a moment, let us know who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I lead a movement called the Warrior Poet Society. We're on all the socials and YouTube and all the places that you might expect to find us in our modern world. The big thrust of the movement is folks who are committed to living for a higher purpose, and they're ready to sacrifice in the defense of others. So kind of sacred protectors, freedom fighters, lovers of truth and people, and defenders of both. As such, it's really more of a wider funnel. And so all kinds of different creeds will plug into that Warrior Poet Society. So even people that don't agree with me theologically or philosophically, it's a wider movement. Though, as you'll see in the book, The Warrior Poet Way that I wrote, I have my personal convictions, which aren't blunted at all. I kind of go right for the jugular. I'm like, this is me. This is what I think is true. This is what I believe in my bones, but I am writing something to a broader audience. And so the book kind of jumps back and forth as appropriate.
That's one of the things I respect most about you is you are blunt, you are to the point. And I think a lot of guys are that way. Just tell me what it is. And then it is essentially a take it or leave it situation. You know, you take it or you leave it. I'm curious, how did you come up with the name Warrior Poet? It seems like there's a dichotomy here of what we could see in our mind as two different things, but they're actually quite similar, aren't they?
One flows into the other. I do not believe that a man should be a lover or a fighter. He should be both. Real love protects. And so, hey, you're a lover of if you really love people, then you're desirous to protect them from all kinds of forces that would wish them ill. You're not going to stand by and just let evil, cede the battlefield to evil. You can't do that. Real lovers protect, and real protectors aren't just mindless, convictionless thugs. Those are mercenaries. That is a hollow tyrant. And so real warriors should be loving. And so lover or fighter really should be lover and fighter. You shouldn't be a lion or a lamb. You really should be both. You should be warrior and poet. And it is that recipe which really solves a riddle, especially for our day and age, 2023, when we seem to be vacillating between two pendulum swings. And this is true throughout all history, particularly in our time now, where we have the ability to be as weak as we desire, and we can have culture and society and government allow us to be enabled in our abject weakness. In fact, we're at a race to the bottom in victim culture as we can allow other people to take care of us, extend adolescence indefinitely. Men can become as weak as they desire to be. And then on the other extreme, you have kind of more of the John Wayne-ish persona as depicted on the silver screen. And this is a man that is really strong in the traditional ways, but extremely weak in other ways that matter more, which are the emotional aspects of, like, you're not going to hold together a marriage, bro. No way you're going to be successful at life. You're going to be strong and tough and then wonder why your life is in utter shambles, even a partial way in. So does that answer a question?
Absolutely.
I kind of got lost there and I just got excited and I riffed and I'm like, oh, this is the thing.
Yeah, they keep riffing. I'm good with that. They don't want to hear me. They hear me all the time. They want to hear you. So it's two sides of the same coin, right? Like you can't have one. You should not have one without the other. And you said the word mindless, and I think we have a generation of people who are proud victims. We're proud that we can be a victim, and whatever that is, whatever symbol or flag, wherever we can fly to say, look how I am. And here's what we come. We have a weak generation. You talk about we become the weakest generation in living memory. Explain how we got to this point.
Right now, I'm sitting in an office and it has perfect air conditioner control exactly as I wanted to. I realized the AC is causing interference. So I just turned my AC off so I can manipulate my environment right now. This is considered work. It's two dudes just sitting talking. We're not, carrying huge boulders up a mountaintop to create some structure of, like, holy cow, you're just drinking a sip of coffee that was probably heated easily in a microwave or a coffee pod.
Even worse, it's water. It's not even coffee. It's water.
Oh,
it's worse.
It's very good. And I bet it's clean water and you didn't have to go get it from a river and boil it and then pour it out. Everything is just even we sit in our cars and drive in perfect comfort and air conditioning. If we get a toothache, we can go to a dentist who gives us a local anesthetic so we feel almost nothing and they fix us right away. When we're not working, we can entertain ourselves every single moment. Look at your the log on how long you spend on your phone, and then think about how much TV you're actually watching in a night and realize, holy cow, never in the history of the world have we been able to put off pain to such an extent and increase pleasure and entertainment to such an extent. This is the easiest time ever to be alive if you just looked at it from a physical comfort and pain putting off standpoint. And so what that has produced is incredibly weak men. I'm considered, given my past and military and wrestling and all and fighting in general, I'm considered by our day's standard kind of a man's man. I'm a dude's dude, and I'm not made of glass, right? But I think I'm probably weaker than even my just a common man in my great-grandparents' generation. I think we are degrading exponentially, and it's not that the comforts of life and technology are bad per se, but it does present us with some interesting challenges, knowing that the only way to make a man tough is through suffering. But if we're able to insulate ourselves from certain types of physical sufferings and pain, we can't develop that strength of character and grit and physicality that has been really important for our survival and for the promulgation of a healthy masculinity that rises up, protects, and is inundated with boldness and courage. What happens to the man when that is thrust by the wayside? And say, well, you're looking at it now. You see the effeminization of men. Where we have lost the ancient paths. And the book, The Warrior Poet Way, the point is to restore it without penduluming over and losing those extremely important characteristics of being a good poet, of being a lamb that pours their life out for others, that lives sacrificially for higher purpose and for other people, to love deeply and wildly without reservation. And so warrior and poet are as important now as they ever have been before. However, we are filled with all kinds of really unique challenges that I'm really jumping headlong into in the book.
I'm thinking if you've ever sat at the feet of an older gentleman who's gone through a lot, especially a sound and solid man of God who stayed with his bride, who raised his kids, who worked on his calloused hands, you feel like, oh, I got a long way to go. I got a long way to go. So oftentimes we sit around guys who are just a little bit lower than us to make ourselves feel just a little bit better. I want to read this. In your book, pretty early on, you say most men do their best while struggling to live up to an ever-changing list of responsibilities and obligations. No matter what they have to offer, no matter how hard they strive, it's never enough. I know these taunts too well, plagued by my own potential, a man fully alive without the weights of fear, apathy, selfishness, procrastination, and insecurity. Deep down, I know I can be more, but often this gap, who I am and ought to be, feels like too much to bridge. How do we start to close that gap? Because I think every man, if he's honest, feels that who I am and who I should be, it just feels like it's too much. And I think this is why guys give up. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking. Why is that?
No, so we live in a culture and a day and age that'll say, no, man, you're perfect just the way you are. And hey, be true to yourself. And if they don't accept you the way you are, they're not even worthy of you. Don't even waste your time on them. And your identity and who you are is the most important ideal out there. And so that's what's really thrust forward. In fact, some people listening are like, absolutely right. That's right. I'm like, no. Check it out. You are not even close to who you could be. You're like, well, you could be a lot better than you are. You could be more vibrant, fully alive. You could have redeemed the time instead of wasting it away with all kinds of entertainment and pleasure and sin. And we could be fearfully wondrous creatures if we just had the discipline and if we had how should I say it? The character, the anointing, the blessing, the inner transformation, that we could be far better than we are. Now, the point of the book is not to delve into the self-help movement, which I think ultimately is just reshuffling the deck of depravity. Whereas you'll get better in some ways and worse in other ways. You'll become a tremendous success vocationally, and you accidentally sacrifice your family on the altar of your new entrepreneurial success. And 10 years in, hey, guess what? You're a multimillionaire, bravo, but your wife has left you and your kids despise you. I'm like, see, the self-help movement naturally will have us kind of just reshuffle the deck of how we spend our time and do our priorities. And so what I'm putting forward in the book is a balanced person, a balanced man who understands how to arbitrate between competing priorities, set good priorities, and then really balance between how they do those. And at the center of it all isn't pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's actually becoming better in the ways that are required so that tide rises all ships. That's the point. And I do offer throughout the book, key ingredient that has been the really big difference maker in me. And that's an inner transformation that didn't come because I tried really hard, but it's because I had an encounter with Jesus who would change me from the inside out, and everything like this amazing electric current going through me affected every area of my life, all of it. So it's like almost everything I seemed to touch turned to gold as long as I was walking with him and his strength. And so that's what I found. The self-help movement has not been helpful for me, but I talk about inner transformation. I talk about certain cancers that can really take the wind out of a man, leave us beleaguered and exhausted and understanding we don't measure up, but not knowing really what to do about that. How fear can steal your very soul. It'll keep you from doing all the things that really you should do. And instead you find these vain glory little escapes like entertainment, or you find something else that's good to do, but not really the best and great thing that you should be doing. And so whether it's looking at conquering fear, or pursuing your wife for a more vibrancy, where you turn the dial a little bit down on your productivity at work, or in certain goals that you may be looking, and turn it up on some of the relational stuff. So joy flows in, and understanding how to rest and bring creative powers to be through a little bit of boredom. And so that we're really jazzed up with the creativity that will naturally flow out of that. The work will also get extremely philosophical, tracking the philosophical progression of the last couple thousand years, so that we can really see ourselves now and understand what's at stake in how the world is being portrayed now versus how it always has. And so in looking to the past is the only way we can really see ourselves clearly in the present. And once we see ourselves in the present, we know how to react to it so that we can live better in the future. So tons packed in. Took a book to say. So here I'm just doing probably a terrible job of describing it at breakneck speed of the 30,000 foot view. But there we go anyway.
I said before we hit record, I'm no way going to do this book justice. And you guys that listen to the podcast, you know that we talk about books and we promote books. We're promoting this book. I think this is a book you need to pick up. It's a book you need to read. You're right. It's not a self-help book. It's a book that tells you the truth. And if you're honest, if you're willing to be honest with yourself, as you read this book, you'll say, you know what, he's right. You may not agree with everything. I haven't found anything yet I don't agree with, but there's the cynic who might not agree with something, but you can't disagree with the premise of what you're talking about. It is spot on. And one of the things that jumps out to me is their use of the word dangerous in a good way. And I think there's a little bit of a fear of men to be too masculine, maybe we're trying to look like something that we're not. But when you drill into that word dangerous, you realize it's something deep in the heart of our soul. And when you tap into that, things begin to change.
Absolutely. So, when I use the word dangerous, I mean, you can be dangerous like a villain is dangerous. You can be dangerous in a bad way. You can also be dangerous in a very good way. That's the hero stuff. You're a force for good. You can also be dangerous in a very weak, passive way. And these are weak, passive men who look really like sweetie pies. But they will be the very first when push comes to shove and it's time to stand a moral ground. They will betray you. They will speak badly of you. They will lie to you. They will do anything to preserve themselves. And I think a lot of people today, they're not necessarily in, pitchfork and horns camp of villain per se, meaning they're not out there like some 20th century Maoist dictator trying to engage in eugenics. But they're also not really putting everything on the line to stand for what's right. They may just be floating, hoping everything goes well for them and people will leave them alone and they'll be able to get ahead a little bit and then hit a really cool vacation spot soon. Like a lot of people want to drive a nice car and not experience any real pain. And what happens is a lot of people, especially under our steeple in the church, have settled for a very passive and weak lifestyle. You're not really sticking your neck out. You really don't want to be hated by anyone, even though the Bible is telling us, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so they did to the false prophets. Jesus drew a line in the sand. The world is supposed to hate you. It's not because you're brash or you give them a reason to, as they hated Jesus without reason. We too should be hated without reason. And if you're not hated, you're probably a weak, pathetic, passive male using the name of Christian and not embodying any of the core tenets. You're supposed to be hated. And if you're not being hated, you're probably not standing for anything, especially as how horribly evil the world is in this day and hour. If you're not hated, you're not actually living for Christ at all. And so you can be that kind of passive man who is also a very different type of dangerous. Now, the good kind of dangerous that I would have us really press into, of course, there's some obvious physical aspects of I'd like you good protectors of the innocent to be able to snap necks and have a clean draw stroke and know how to disarm someone with a gun and all the good protect stuff, all the stuff that you're like, yeah, man, I want to learn that junk. I'm like, yeah, you do. That's good protector stuff. Grow into some of that stuff. But with dangerous, I also mean from an intellectual level. I mean it also from a spirit character level. Whereas you have a strength of spirit and resolve and character and also intellect, which is a different thing, but also a good place for us to be dangerous to, so that we can destroy every argument and lofty opinion, which sets itself up to the knowledge of God. We want to be able to destroy arguments, and we want to be of such white hot virtuous conviction that we refuse to be bullied and censored. We refuse to stand by and let evil take the battlefield while we sit back and do nothing in comfort and ease. We want to be dangerous in that we refuse we refuse to not live by our convictions, right? And so we're not going to be bullied.
No, and we're not budging. I think, when you say that, I think back on 2020, there was a lot of things that happened in that year, a lot of things through March to the end of the year. And I think what we learned was there were some people that I would not go into a spiritual or physical battle with. And you thought you could, you thought you could, and you realize how quickly they folded. And I think it goes back to that word mindlessness. And in your book, you talk about every day we're being fed these messages that are contradictory to our worldview. And yet there's a bunch of Christians who are mindless, who just keep digesting them and believing them. And so how do we get away from that? How do we instill that filter to say, no, you're not going to feed me or my wife, my kids, this propaganda, or you're not going to pander to the masses just so I can look like I'm accepted? How do I stand on conviction, stand on what is true, and say, I'm not budging, and you are not going to mess with my people.
So, there was a time, not even too long ago, where we had the luxury of being able to kind of pick and choose in culture and be able to find, all right, there's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff, but I can kind of do it. Now, what I see is all of our institutions of power have been taken over by those who are woke and antithetical to a Christian worldview, or even just a decent worldview. And what is being done in the public square is so flagrantly wrong, from normalizing and accepting pedophilia to murdering over 1 million babies a year in the womb, to men competing in women's sports. And that's I'm seeing the decay and destruction of everything. I'm seeing our political leaders try to throw in prison the competing political leaders. And I'm seeing rampant corruption everywhere I go. I see racist ideology pushed in schools in the name of eliminating racism, which is just absolutely crazy to me. Everywhere I look, I see something. I can't even watch old places that we would go for entertainment. Of like, we've canceled Netflix and Hulu and Disney. We don't watch any of that junk anymore because they are after our kids and trying to train them in something we frankly think is extremely bad. And so what that means, since all of our institutions of power have been essentially overrun, we've been really pulling back into our own homes and our own network. So we have a homeschool co-op, and that's where we educate our kids. And it's a really cool thing. We know tons of other families, and they're like-minded and wonderful in those respects. And we're hanging out with folks in our church and our community and our workplace as well, as something that's more of safe, like-minded folks, instead engaging in a lot of the entertainment things we did. Our family is a reading family. Last night we were reading a book as a family, and then me and my son are typing away, writing a kid's story together, which has been really, really fun. But we read and we're outside a lot. We're on a homestead, and so we're growing our own food and have a whole bunch of animals around. But I guess we have been pressing farther back into the way people used to live, which was a healthier lifestyle. It was a more fulfilling lifestyle. I know where my food comes from. I know the voices that are speaking into my children's lives, and I've eliminated great amount of poisonous toxicity that have been going through, unchecked into my wife and I, just interacting with the world. We're like, nope, that's a fallen institution. We've really pulled back a lot. It doesn't mean that I'm not engaging with the world. Here I am on a public podcast, engaging with the world, not retreating from the world and just saying good luck. But for health and wellness in our own worlds, we've kind of got our drawbridges set up so that we can live as we believe is healthy and edifying, and then jumping into the world through all of our media ways to be able to hopefully help some people out there and engage in the fight of our lives.
I'm with you. As much as I hate it, I hate that we, have to be so keep your head on a swivel with so many things that are going. It's actually been a good thing. It's caused us to have more conversations within our home. We saved a lot of money because we're not spending money at these places, and just what it is really refined the focus. It's really refined our focus, and it's led us to have really healthy conversations that we may not have had otherwise. One of the things you talk about is let them underestimate you, being the most dangerous man in the room. And we talk to men about being men of presence. When you walk in, it should mean something. Could you unpack what it means to be the most dangerous man in the room?
Sure. I like that you use the word presence. I think that's a thing. What I don't want is a cheap and superficial presence, somebody that's just loud or obnoxious, or you're the clown. And so, yeah, you've got a faux kind of presence, and that everyone knows you're there, but it's not out of deep respect or admiration or something like that. It's because you won't shut up and you're the loudest dude. And so that's not what I want of when we think about presence, or when I think about presence, and I'm not really using that word. I'm just seeing that you do, and I really like the word I want it to be an outflow of respect for virtue, for accomplishment, for wisdom. When I'm around really wise people, I speak a little less and I ask more questions, because I'm wanting what they can offer me. And I realize I'm like, this person is the one that I really want to speak. And so I'll be a little bit quieter. I'm like, come on, Brent, let's pull something out of this person. And so in the book, what I'm really trying to urge people toward is a life of humility. I was an Army Ranger once upon a time. And in that area of special operations, I noticed that some of the deadliest dudes on the planet, and I worked with everyone from SEALs and Delta and blah, blah, everyone, SAS, SBS, and all the 3-letter agencies, the most dangerous dudes I ever met were the humble ones. Absolutely deadly. And they're ones that you could still teach things to. They were constantly learning and adapting. Some of them wouldn't look humble by some means, because they were just kind of rage monsters. And then you would find other guys that were just calm, cool calculation. So I don't want to craft a picture of Ranger Battalion that's everybody's these, deep thinkers and great humble guys, because you really get shards of different individuals and expressions. But I did notice when I got to Ranger Battalion, it was with a few other soldiers. There was one in particular I'm thinking about, and he was kind of like the physical training stud. I'm like, man, if anyone's going to make it, that guy will. And though he got to Ranger Battalion, he didn't stay there. He was arrogant. And though he was better than almost everyone that arrived, he was as good as he was ever going to get, because he was arrogant. He wasn't teachable. He was a prideful guy. And really, you have to be able to continue to learn and be trained. And if you can't do that, well, you're about as good as you're ever going to get. And he washed out. His attitude sucked. And so anyway, I think humility is never, or you want to be the most dangerous man in the room. But part of that danger isn't just strength of arms and hey, can you beat up 12 ninjas hiding in the bushes for you, but it's also strength of character. I think that's true. And you cannot be a good man and be arrogant at the same time. Humility is a piece of that. And so I go into a real fun chapter of The Most Dangerous Man in the Room, where I am, arrive strength and danger, but along a path of humility, which is a surprising and interesting way to arrive at something. You wouldn't think of like, oh, that's the way to get further in strength than I ever assumed. And I really lay out that connection and why it's so critical.
One last thing here. As you're talking about that, I think of guys like David Goggins, Cameron Haynes, Jocko Will. These guys are, they put out content on a regular basis and they're doing incredible things. These guys are just resolve, whatever. But I think sometimes we think, okay, that's the aspiration. And there's a lot of things we can learn from those individuals. But like you're saying, being that dangerous man is a guy who can love his wife well, is a guy who will sit there with his kid and will go, play catch or go to the if we, heaven forbid, dance recital, whatever it is, you'll do these manly things. And I think sometimes we look at those guys and we say, okay, that's what it is. And we don't really get to see behind the curtain. And so I think what you're talking about here is we need to be careful who we learn from. And you said the most transformational thing that happened to you is encountering Jesus. So I think from Jesus, he's right. The foundation. We build from there. What did that do for you? You've been around some dudes. You've been around some grown men who can do some manly things. But you said Jesus is the one that he grabbed your soul, as we know here. And that was a game changer.
Yeah. And so there's, everyone's looking for different role models and people to look up to and model your way of life after. And I haven't met Goggins or Jocko yet. We run in the same circles, so I think I'm bound to run into him sooner or later. But as of present, I haven't met him yet. But I do wonder. I want to get to know him, especially Goggins, because he's a little bit more on an extreme of getting up wildly early and pushing it, no excuses. And I like all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, I speak that language. I know how to dig deep into that well of resolve and force yourself beyond anything you imagine was your actual personal physical limits. And so I dig all that stuff. But I'm also a man of priorities and balancing between them, and recognize my goal in life is not to be able to run 50 miles cold without shoes while carrying a rucksack. That's not my big goal in life. And I know it's not his either. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying there's a great cost to me waking up at 4:30 every single morning. And that's every night after the kids go down. That is sacred husband-wife time for me. And I'm pouring into my marriage every single day that I'm able to, if I'm gone on a trip, that's hard. But I mean, when I'm home, I want to be with my wife, my blushing bride of 16 years of we are having a fantastic time in our happily ever after, even as the world falls apart around us. We're on this great adventure together, and we had to fight for our marriage because it wasn't good before. And now it is amazing. And so I want to continue to cultivate that so she flourishes, my kids flourish, and every life that I'm attached to, I'm helping to make better. And that is a better goal to me than being just twisted steel and sex appeal, I want to balance and do all of it. So I'm not going to turn into an undisciplined, weak, fat body either. I want good balance in all things, but to super elevate my physical prowess as I'm a middle-aged man here, not in the military and not being paid to hunt and kill terrorists anymore. Well, my battlefield has shifted, and I would like to recalibrate and balance in a more healthy manner. So I'm not going to be nearly as extreme as those, is particularly Goggins in the physical aspects. Now, so there you go. Now, that was just to answer that piece. You'd asked me the other, another piece of that was having to do with when I met Jesus. And that's actually what I care more about than anything. I'm 22 years into a conversion. And though I teach firearms for a living and gunfighting and some other cool gun fu type stuff, anything you do long enough, you get tired of. It's kind of like, to me, shooting is crazy as it'll sound to all the listeners. Guns are work to me. I don't want to do it in my free time. It's just work. And when you see a cool gun, see just hammer, screwdriver, wrench, I don't really care. You'll be like, hey, look at this gun. I give a rip about your gun, man. I don't care. It's just a tool to me. And I got a ton of guns and they're cool. I mean, there's worse things to do for a living. So I'm grateful for that. But the only thing in life that I have never, ever got tired of talking about isn't a thing at all. It's a person, and that's Jesus Christ. And so he is who created us by his might and for his good pleasure. So the purpose of life is to make great the name of Jesus. And that's what I'm going to continue to do, and whatever I am doing. And so he's given us the Warrior Poet Society to steward in a very particular, nuanced way. And so that's what we want to do. I want to be obedient to that call. He's the one who, from the inside out, both who strengthens me to will and to work for his good pleasure.
Well, John, the book is, as you know, The Warrior Poet Way, A Guide to Living Free and Dying Well. It's out tomorrow, July 11th. Man, where can we go to learn more about you, buy the book, and all the things you're talking about?
Sure. Visit thewarriorpoetway.com. That's thewarriorpoetway.com. That'll give a landing page. We'll get you all the checkout options for the book. Appreciate it if you pick one up for you or men's group or something to give away, or if you have somebody who wouldn't pick up a Bible or get into something else, this would be a good kind of gateway drug. This would be something that a non-religious person would even get into that would inch them a little bit closer to your worldview. And so that could be a good thing. We appreciate any support you guys could muster. At thewarriorpoetway.com, that'll land you at kind of like a page on our greater website, which will have all of our links to our video content, also our streaming service, that's watchwpsn.com, WPSN. So we have all kinds of shows and our gunfighting classes and things. And then we have our YouTube links in there and all our social media links on Twitter and whatnot. And so Warrior Poet Way, or thewarriorpoetway.com will get you everything you need.
Yeah, I hear from guys all the time who we recommend a book. They buy it. They tell me, feedback. I look forward to hearing from you guys who pick up this book and get it. He's exactly right. If there's a non-believer, a guy who's I don't know, this is going to give him a different view of what a man of God looks, lives, and sounds like. So, John, thank you for being on the show today.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
You men in the herd, we're going to continue that conversation over there. John, I want to ask you about heroes, wimps, and villains. Once again, men, I want to thank you for listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. Now, one more thing before you go. I want to encourage you, would you consider joining the herd? The herd is a $5 a month monthly subscription to the Pursuit of Manliness. These men who are in the herd, they not only get bonus podcast content, but they're also a part of a community that has ongoing conversations, monthly Zoom calls, and more. For just $5 a month, you can help keep this ministry moving forward. You can also gather with like-minded brothers across the globe. Men, thanks for listening, and let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.